Imagine for a moment, if you will, the power grid. That incredibly complex network of wires, those humming substations, the huge power plants that, well, basically fuel our entire modern world.
Right, something we mostly take for granted.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Now imagine if all of that wasn't just machinery. Imagine it was alive, like a living system.
Alive how? You mean responsive?
Responsive, yeah.
Mhm.
Able to learn, adapt, maybe even heal itself if something goes wrong. It's a pretty powerful thought, isn't it?
It is, especially when you consider the current state of things.
Because right now, that infrastructure, the grid that underpins everything, it's kind of buckling. Buckling under its own history, you could say.
That's a good way to put it. It's aging infrastructure, much of it.
We're talking about all those overhead cables,
Yeah.
so vulnerable to wind, to wildfires. We've seen the devastation.
Yeah, California, Australia, those
Yeah.
were stark reminders.
And the substations, often unmanned, decades old, just not designed for today's world, for the digital demands, the constant power needs.
Absolutely not. And the energy loss.
Oh, the waste. Just staggering amounts of energy bled off as heat during transmission. It's fundamentally an analog system struggling in a digital age.
Mm-hmm. Brittle and, frankly, not very smart.
So the big question is, can we actually move beyond that? Can we really imagine the grid as a living nervous system for our civilization?
That's the core idea, isn't
That's
it?
precisely our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore a completely reimagined energy future. And we're drawing insights from this really fascinating white paper.
The one framed as if written by Tesla.
Exactly. Written as if by Nikola Tesla himself, looking back from the year 2025. But here's the thing. It insists this isn't science fiction.
Right, it claims it's rooted in current scientific possibility.
Rooted in scientific possibility and immediate prototyping potential. That's the quote. It's less a prediction, more like a blueprint, a call to action.
A pretty ambitious blueprint.
Totally. We'll be digging into superconducting transmission lines, buried underground, space-based solar power beaming energy from orbit,
Piezoelectric roads generating power from traffic.
dynamic EV charging on the move,
Yeah.
nano-enhanced environmental sensors, AI managing the whole thing. It's a lot.
It's a fully integrated vision.
And this deep dive is really for you, the listener. Whether you're prepping for a meeting, trying to get up to speed on this field fast, or you're just really curious about how these technologies could reshape everything.
Well, I want to give you that shortcut to being well-informed.
Exactly. The essential download on this future grid.
And what I find really captivating about this whole concept, this white paper, is that Tesla reborn framing.
Yeah, that's a great hook.
It's not literal, obviously, but it captures that visionary spirit he had, his dream of a wireless energy world.
A dream that was maybe ahead of its time.
Way ahead. But now, with satellites, ubiquitous sensors, these material science breakthroughs and
Yeah.
superconductors, the algorithms, maybe it's finally feasible.
So the paper argues this is a viable path forward.
It does. It proposes this unified way to shift from what it calls the analog, brittle, and dumb grid.
Which is largely what we still have.
Right. To one that's truly intelligent, resilient, and ultra-efficient. So that's our journey today. We'll break down each piece.
From under our feet to outer space.
Exactly. See how it all connects to form this living energy architecture. It's quite a leap.
Okay, let's start with the foundation, the problems we're facing right now. So let's ground ourselves in today's reality. The white paper is pretty blunt about the state of our current electrical infrastructure. Despite holding modern life together, it says it's struggling. What are the specific weak points it identifies?
It's quite direct. A major one is vulnerability. Those overhead cables we mentioned?
Yeah.
They're just sitting ducks for extreme weather, which, seems to be getting more common. The paper specifically mentions the California wildfires, the Australian bushfires,
Horrific examples.
showing how wind and fire can just cripple huge sections of the grid, leaving millions without power. It makes the abstract problem very real, very human.
Absolutely. It's not just an inconvenience, it can be a catastrophe. The environmental cost.
That's another huge point. The paper talks about older plants, coal and gas, spewing entropy into the sky.
Entropy. That's a powerful word choice. Waste, disorder.
Exactly, and then it points to the substations, calls them obsolete.
Obsolete how?
They're just not built for the complexity of modern power flows, not for the two-way street of distributed generation, not for the digital demands.
Which leads to that paradox you mentioned. Our lives are hyper-electrified, smart devices everywhere.
Right. We live in this incredibly sophisticated digital world.
But the grid powering it all is still stuck in the past.
Yeah.
Analog, brittle, and dumb. as the paper puts it.
That's the core disconnect. It's like trying to run, I don't know, the latest AI on vacuum tubes. The foundation doesn't match the superstructure.
That really crystallizes the issue. So connecting this to the bigger picture, the paper frames this as a critical moment, right?
It does. The abstract basically asks, how is our global infrastructure coping with population growth, climate volatility, these outdated energy systems?
And the answer is
Not well. It's faltering under the strain. That's why the paper argues this isn't about small tweaks. It's about a fundamental reinvention.
a complete overhaul.
A complete overhaul. And just to be clear, it's not talking about, perpetual motion machines or free energy in that fringe sense.
No pseudoscience here.
No. It's focused on unlocking real, practical potential, renewable, intelligent, ultra-efficient systems.
And it lays out specific areas for innovation.
Yes. 6 key areas that need to merge. Superconducting and HVDC power corridors, dynamic wireless EV charging,
Right.
space-based solar,
Yeah.
smart roadways harvesting energy, nanosensing for the environment, and AI control systems tying it all together.
Wow. Okay, that's the roadmap then. Let's dive into the first big infrastructure piece. All right, the first major component, subterranean superconducting power corridors. The paper makes a strong case against our standard copper lines, saying they're plagued by resistive losses, weather vulnerability, and environmental degradation. Let's break down resistive loss first. Why is that such a big deal?
Okay, think of it like friction. When electricity flows through a normal wire, like copper, the electrons bump into the atoms of the wire.
Like microscopic pinball?
Sort of, yeah. And each bump turns a tiny bit of electrical energy into heat. It's wasted energy.
It doesn't sound like much individually.
Individually, no. But multiply that by millions of tiny bumps over hundreds, even thousands of miles of cable. It adds up hugely. We lose a significant percentage of the power generated before it even reaches homes and businesses.
It's gone. Vanished as heat.
Exactly, which means we have to generate more power than we actually need just to compensate for the loss. It's incredibly inefficient.
Okay, so that's the problem. The solution proposed is these buried superconducting corridors. What makes a superconductor super?
It's an amazing property of certain materials. When you cool them below a specific, very cold temperature, their critical temperature, their electrical resistance drops to absolutely zero.
Zero, like none at all.
Precisely zero. The electricity flows through completely unimpeded, no collisions, no friction, no energy lost as heat.
That sounds revolutionary for power transmission.
It absolutely is. It means you could send vast amounts of power with perfect efficiency.
And the paper mentions specific breakthroughs making this more viable. Something about ion beam modified YBCO microbridges. Sounds complex.
It is technical, yeah. YBCO stands for yttrium barium copper oxide. It's a type of ceramic that becomes superconducting at relatively higher temperatures compared to older superconductors, although still very cold, needing liquid nitrogen usually.
Okay, so high temperature is relative here.
Very relative,
Yeah.
yes. Now, the microbridges are tiny engineered structures made of this YBCO. The really clever part is the ion beam modification.
What does that do?
Scientists use a focused beam of ions charged atoms to very precisely tweak the atomic structure of the YBCO. It's like atomic scale engineering.
To make it conduct better.
Not exactly conduct better. It's already superconducting. It's about making it handle more current and making it more stable in real-world conditions, especially around magnetic fields. It involves something called flux pinning.
Flux pinning.
Yeah, imagine tiny magnetic whirlpools trying to form inside the superconductor as current flows. If these whirlpools move around, they can create tiny bits of resistance, which you want to avoid. Flux pinning essentially locks those whirlpools in place.
Like anchors.
Exactly like anchors. This ion beam modification is getting much better at creating these pinning sites, making the YBCO more robust, able to handle higher currents without losing its superconductivity. That's the breakthrough. It makes building practical superconducting cables much more feasible.
Got it. So that translates to the advantages the paper lists.
Yeah.
Zero resistive loss, smaller footprint for more power in cities, less electromagnetic interference, safer because they're buried.
All huge benefits, especially for dense urban areas.
Which brings up the question, how do you actually build this?
Yeah.
Burying superconducting cables sounds like a massive undertaking.
It is, but the vision is practical. The paper talks about stabilizing these superconductors in cryogenic ducts, essentially. Super insulated pipes carrying the necessary coolant, like liquid nitrogen.
Like underground pipelines for electricity.
Precisely. Routed beneath cities. And for managing the power, it suggests modular, factory-built subsurface substations. Think prefabricated vaults using gas-insulated switchgear or GIS.
Prefab, like plug-and-play infrastructure.
That's the idea. Drawing on existing designs like those used by power authorities now, but adapted. These vaults could go under intersections, parks, industrial zones. They'd handle voltage regulation autonomously, sync power phases rapidly.
So parts of this aren't entirely science fiction. There are precedents.
There are. It combines cutting-edge materials with modular, manufacturable engineering principles. The paper argues this isn't just about efficiency. It's about building a resilient urban power nervous system ready to connect to wider networks. And crucially, it says the tech is ready for prototyping now.
Okay, a grounded vision for a very advanced concept. Hashtag BHVDC backbone and reactive power control. So superconductors handle the city power efficiently. But what about getting power across continents? From, say, a massive solar farm in the desert to a city thousands of miles away. Superconductors over that distance. Is that feasible?
That's where HVDC comes in, high voltage direct current. It's really the complementary technology for long-haul transmission.
How does it differ from our standard AC alternating current?
The key advantage is lower line losses over very long distances. AC systems inherently lose more power due to factors like inductance and capacitance, especially over hundreds or thousands of miles. HVDC avoids a lot of that.
And it eliminates reactive power issues. What's reactive power again?
Okay, think of active power as the power doing useful work, lighting a bulb, spinning a motor. Reactive power is sort of an electrical side effect in AC systems. It's needed to create magnetic fields for things like motors and transformers, but it doesn't do work itself. It just sloshes back and forth in the wires.
Sounds inefficient.
It can be.
Mm-hmm.
Too much reactive power sloshing around makes the grid harder to manage, can cause voltage drops, and leads to overall inefficiency. HVDC, being direct current, just doesn't have that same issue. Power flows straight, point A to point B.
Simpler, more direct.
And more efficient over long distances. Plus, HVDC has another huge advantage the paper highlights: asynchronous interconnection.
Right, connecting grids with different frequencies, like Europe's 50 hertz and North America's 60 hertz. How does HVDC bridge that gap? Analogy time.
Analogy time. Imagine two bands playing great music, but at slightly different tempos. You can't just plug their sound systems together. It would be chaos.
A mess.
HVDC acts like a sophisticated DJ or sound engineer with a digital converter. It takes the music, the power from one grid, converts it from AC to DC, transmits it efficiently, and then converts it back to AC at the exact frequency and phase needed by the receiving grid.
Ah, the conversion is key.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here, the real enabler, are things called voltage source converters, or VSCs.
VSCs.
Yes. These are advanced power electronics that give HVDC incredible flexibility. They allow for independent control of both the active power flow and, if needed at the connection port, reactive power.
So they can manage both the workhorse power and that stabilizing reactive power separately.
Exactly. This independent control is crucial for stabilizing voltage and frequency very quickly, especially when you're dealing with fluctuating renewables like wind or solar or grid disturbances. VSCs are the smart interfaces making modern HVDC so powerful and adaptable.
So VSCs allow these different grids to talk to each other seamlessly. But managing these huge networks must require incredible control, right? The paper mentions coordinated control and intelligent relays that work in milliseconds.
Yes, think of it as the grid's high-speed nervous system again. If there's a fault, a lightning strike, a line failure somewhere in this vast network, intelligent relays detect it instantly.
In milliseconds. Faster than a blink.
Much faster. They communicate across the network using coordinated control systems to isolate the fault immediately and reroute power around it, all happening automatically, often before human operators are even aware there's a problem.
Preventing cascading blackouts.
That's the goal. Minimize disruption, maximize resilience. The paper also briefly touches on managing reactive power, where HVDC connects to existing AC systems, using things like active filters to keep everything stable.
So it all fits together.
It does. HVDC forms the long-distance arteries connecting continents, linking major renewable hubs to population centers. Paired with those urban superconducting veins, it creates this unified, efficient, continent-spanning energy network. Hashtag, piezoelectric, and thermal harvesting infrastructure.
Okay, let's switch gears dramatically. From continent-spanning grids to sidewalks. The paper talks about micro-energy harvesting, capturing energy from footsteps, cars, vibrations, even heat. How does that even work?
It sounds small, but the idea is to create a supplemental layer of distributed power right where it's needed. One key technology is piezoelectric materials.
Piezoelectric, I've heard that term. What does it mean?
These are special materials, certain crystals, ceramics, even some plastics that generate a small electric charge when you squeeze them or bend them. Mechanical stress creates electricity.
So you put these under roads?
Exactly. Embed them beneath highways, crosswalks, maybe rail lines. Every time a car drives over, a person walks by, a train vibrates the track. Squish. A little pulse of electricity is generated.
Wow. Turning traffic jams into power sources.
Potentially, yes. It wouldn't be huge amounts per event, but cumulatively. And that localized power could run streetlights, traffic sensors, information signs, or charge small local batteries. The paper cites research showing these materials are becoming robust enough for this kind of application.
Okay, that's kinetic energy. What about heat? The paper mentions thermoelectric generators, TEGs.
Right. TEGs work on a different principle, temperature difference. If you have one side of a material hot and the other side cold, it generates electricity.
Where do you find that temperature difference in a city?
Think about asphalt on a sunny day. The surface gets really hot, right?
Definitely, you could fry an egg.
Well, the ground underneath, or layers deeper in the roadbed, stays much cooler. TEGs embedded in the road could exploit that natural heat gradient, converting that temperature difference directly into electricity.
Harvesting waste heat from the sun beating down on roads.
Exactly. Research suggests the potential output, especially over large surface areas like roads or parking lots, could be quite substantial. It's capturing energy that's just radiating away right now.
This raises an important question, though. Each step, each car, each bit of sun. It sounds like tiny amounts of power. Is the cumulative effect really significant enough to matter?
That's the key point, cumulative effect and distributed generation. Individually, yes, it's small, but think about millions of footsteps, thousands of cars, vast areas of pavement across an entire city or country generating power constantly, autonomously.
Feeding local microgrids, powering sensors, charging stations.
Precisely, without straining the main grid. But there's a dual benefit the paper stresses.
Yeah, more than just power.
Yes, these embedded systems are also sensors. The piezoelectric layers can detect stress in the pavement, maybe indicating a forming pothole or structural issue.
Yeah.
They can monitor traffic flow patterns in real time. They could even potentially detect seismic vibrations.
Whoa. So the road isn't just generating power, it's monitoring its own health and the activity on it.
Exactly. It blurs the line between structure and system. Static infrastructure becomes responsive, semi-autonomous. It becomes part of the grid's sensory network.
Bringing power back to the people, one step at a time, as the paper says. That's quite poetic.
It is. It's about democratizing energy generation at the micro level, making our environment an active participant, deepening resilience from the ground up. Literally. Hashtag DD, grid-scale storage, ultracapacitors, and SMES vaults.
Okay, we've generated power, transmitted it, even harvested it from footsteps. But the elephant in the room for renewables is always storage. What happens when the sun goes down or the wind stops? The paper argues lithium-ion batteries, while crucial, have limitations.
They do. Finite cycle life they wear out. Thermal risks they can overheat. Relatively slow charge speeds compared to grid needs sometimes, and, the environmental impact of mining the materials.
So what are the alternatives the white paper proposes for grid-scale storage?
It focuses on two compelling technologies that complement batteries: ultracapacitors and SMES, superconducting magnetic energy storage.
Ultracapacitors.
Yeah.
Different from batteries, how?
Fundamentally different. Batteries store energy chemically. Ultracapacitors store it electrostatically, basically holding electrons on the surface of highly porous materials, like a supercharged static electricity sponge.
And the advantages?
Speed and durability. Because it's not a chemical reaction, they can charge and discharge incredibly fast in seconds or even milliseconds. And they can do this hundreds of thousands, even millions of times without degrading.
Wow, batteries wear out much faster.
Much faster. Ultracapacitors have amazing power density. They can deliver a huge punch of energy quickly. This makes them perfect for rapid response grid tasks.
Like what?
Frequency regulation, instantly injecting or absorbing power to keep the grid's frequency stable. Peak shaving, handling sudden spikes in demand. And smoothing renewables, balancing out the short-term dips and surges from wind or solar. They're the grid's fast twitch muscles.
Got it. Instant reflexes. Now, SMES. Superconducting magnetic energy storage. That sounds exotic.
It is pretty advanced. SMES systems store energy directly in a magnetic field created by a coil of superconducting wire.
Using those zero-resistance wires again.
Exactly. Once the current is flowing in that superconducting coil and it's kept cold, the energy stays stored in the magnetic field almost indefinitely with virtually zero loss.
And discharging it.
Also incredibly fast milliseconds and with almost 100% round-trip efficiency. Plus, like ultracapacitors, they don't degrade with use. Zero memory loss.
So super fast, super efficient, but maybe for shorter durations.
Primarily, yes. They excel at delivering huge amounts of power very quickly, making them ideal for stabilizing the grid against major disturbances like faults or providing instantaneous backup power. Think of them as giant energy shock absorbers.
So what's fascinating here is how these fit with batteries, right? They fill a niche.
Precisely. It's not about replacing lithium-ion entirely. Batteries are great for storing large amounts of energy over hours, time-shifting solar power, for example. Ultracapacitors and SMES excel at the immediate, high-power, short-duration needs. Transient stability, grid hardening.
A layered approach to storage.
Exactly. You deploy them strategically alongside renewables or at critical grid nodes. They absorb the sudden shocks, handle the peaks, prevent those small issues from cascading into big blackouts. The paper uses a great analogy.
Which is?
A resilient grid must think like a brain, able to react in milliseconds, shift resources fluidly, and learn from disruption. Ultracapacitors and SMES provide that millisecond reaction time, that fluid resource shifting.
Yeah.
They add flexibility, not just raw capacity. Hashtag EAI-controlled self-healing smart grid systems.
We've got the power flowing, stored, even harvested. But the white paper argues the modern grid needs more than just hardware. It needs intelligence. It needs to evolve from a passive system to an active, adaptive organism. What's driving that intelligence?
AI, artificial intelligence. The core concept is the AI-powered self-healing smart grid. Think of it as the grid's digital nervous system and brain, all rolled into one.
Self-healing. How does that work?
It involves a vast network of smart sensors, intelligent relays, and control units deployed everywhere across the grid. They're constantly monitoring everything: power flow, voltage, frequency, temperature, looking for anomalies, predicting potential failures.
Okay, constant monitoring. Then what?
When a disruption happens, say, a tree falls on a line or a transformer fails, the system doesn't wait for a phone call or a manual dispatch. The AI detects the fault instantly.
Yeah.
It automatically isolates the problem area, reroutes power around it using those smart switches and relays, and restores service to as many customers as possible, often within seconds.
Seconds. That's incredible compared to hours or days now.
It's a complete paradigm shift in grid reliability, minimizing outage duration automatically.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the paper talks about decentralizing this intelligence using edge-based AI and the Internet of Things, IoT. What does edge-based mean here?
Edge-based AI means the intelligence isn't just in one central supercomputer. It's distributed out to the edges of the network, into smart meters in homes, into sensors on transformers, into the control units in substations.
So the devices themselves are smart.
Exactly. They can collect data locally, analyze it, and make decisions right there on the spot without having to send everything back to a central hub and wait for instructions.
Faster reaction times?
Much faster reaction times, reduced latency, and increased resilience. If one part of the network communication fails, the local edge devices can still manage their area. The paper says these nodes act like synapses in the grid's brain.
A distributed intelligence.
Precisely, and it goes beyond just reacting to faults. The paper mentions concepts like a mobility control center, or MCC.
More of that too.
An AI system like that wouldn't just manage power delivery, it would coordinate energy consumption. Think about managing huge fleets of electric vehicles, optimizing their charging schedules based on grid load and renewable availability.
So charging cars when there's lots of solar power.
Exactly. Or coordinating grid-tied batteries in homes and businesses. Even subtly adjusting thermostats or appliance cycles in smart homes to balance demand across the grid. It's like air traffic control, but for electrons, ensuring optimal flow and minimal waste.
Wow. So these grids aren't just reactive, they're proactive. They anticipate problems, manage resources dynamically.
They even could potentially negotiate energy trades between microgrids or large users automatically. The grid becomes this living infrastructure, constantly learning, adapting, getting smarter and more efficient over time.
Sounds amazing, but what are the hurdles?
The paper is clear. The challenge is not technological, but organizational. The AI, the sensors, the algorithms, they're largely here or very close.
So what's stopping us?
It's about having the collective will to decentralize control. It's about ensuring robust cybersecurity and data privacy, a huge issue. And it's about trusting these AI systems to make critical decisions that were once purely human domains.
That's a big leap of faith.
It is. It requires new regulations, new business models, unprecedented collaboration, and overcoming a lot of inertia. It's as much a societal challenge as an engineering one.
Okay, let's look up. Way up. The white paper takes us to the final frontier for energy, space.
Hmm.
Why look to space when we're developing renewables down here?
Well, terrestrial renewables, as great as they are, have limitations. Land use is a big one. Solar and wind farms need a lot of space. And intermittency, the sun sets, the wind drops.
Right, the consistency issue.
Space-based solar power, or SBSP, offers a potential way around that. It taps into the sun, our ultimate energy source, but does it from orbit.
Where the sun always shines.
Pretty much. Imagine huge solar arrays in geostationary orbit, about 22,000 miles up. They're bathed in sunlight 24/7, no night, no clouds, no atmospheric filtering. They collect solar energy constantly with much higher intensity than on Earth's surface.
Okay, collect it, but how do you get it down here? Extension cord.
No, the concept is to convert that collected solar energy into microwaves or laser beams and beam it wirelessly down to dedicated receiving stations on Earth.
Beaming power from space. That still sounds like science fiction. Is it feasible?
The paper argues the technology is advancing rapidly. It mentions research on solar-pumped lasers, converting sunlight directly into laser beams aimed at ground receivers, maybe photovoltaic panels tuned to the laser's frequency, particularly good for desert locations.
Fewer clouds, lots of space.
Exactly. And it also discusses microwave beaming, which it calls a more mature method, using large orbital antennas to send a controlled microwave beam to a large ground antenna called our rectenna.
Is that safe? Microwaves.
The study cited suggests that the beam intensity at the receiver, while significant, could be managed well within established safety limits, especially if sited away from populated areas. The paper argues even a modest array could deliver gigawatt-scale power similar to a large conventional power plant.
Okay, but this must face criticism, right? What are the big challenges people raise?
Oh, definitely. Critics point to the enormous cost of launching and assembling these huge structures in orbit. There's the technical challenge of precisely aiming the beam over 22,000 miles, and the growing problem of space debris is a real concern.
How does the paper respond to those?
It acknowledges them, but points to ongoing progress. Advances in cheaper launch vehicles, lighter and stronger materials for the satellites, sophisticated AI for automatic beam control and station keeping, and modular designs that allow for robotic assembly and repair in orbit.
So, engineering problems with potential solutions.
That's the argument. And it connects SBSP viability to the broader boom in the space industry.
How so?
Think about satellite internet constellations like Starlink, plans for space manufacturing, asteroid mining, the Artemis program going back to the moon. All this activity is building up the infrastructure, the supply chains, the expertise needed to support large-scale orbital projects like SBSP.
It's not happening in isolation.
No, it's part of a larger trend of integrating space into our economy. The paper sees this growing orbital infrastructure as the scaffolding for a space energy economy.
And beyond just clean energy, the paper stresses a strategic role, a fail-safe.
Yes, this is crucial. Imagine a massive blackout on Earth due to a natural disaster, a cyber attack, or conflict. SBSP, being physically separate in orbit, could potentially keep beaming power down to critical infrastructure, hospitals, communication hubs, emergency services, bypassing the damaged terrestrial grid entirely.
Security through vertical separation. That's a powerful idea. Resilience.
Unmatched resilience, potentially. It changes the game for energy security. The paper concludes this part really evocatively, saying orbit is becoming a grid node waiting to be claimed. And unlike fossil fuels, the sun's energy is inexhaustible. It truly expands the grid concept beyond Earth.
Okay, we've explored all these incredible components, the superconducting tunnels, the HVDC arteries, the energy harvesting roads, the superfast storage, the AI brain, the power from space. Now, how does it all come together? The paper emphasizes that these aren't just separate ideas. The real challenge is integration.
Exactly. It's about creating a seamless, unified ecosystem.
Can you paint a picture? The paper uses an example like a big city, Los Angeles or Berlin. What would this integrated system actually look and feel like in operation?
Okay, picture Berlin. Beneath the streets, unseen, are those modular superconducting urban trunk lines, the MSUTs, carrying huge amounts of power with zero loss, cooled by internal systems.
The invisible energy highways.
Right. They connect to those compact, autonomous GIS vault substations buried under parks or squares, managing local power flow intelligently.
And these city networks connect outwards.
Yes, they seamlessly link to regional and continental HVDC lines, bringing in clean power from, say, offshore wind farms in the North Sea or solar arrays in southern Europe with minimal loss and maximum control.
So underground along distances covered. What about street level?
Street level is alive. The pavements, the roads they're embedded with those self-learning power surfaces, the SLPS, harvesting energy from every footstep, every car, every bit of warmth.
The city is a battery.
In a sense, yes. And dedicated lanes or zones have the Tesla Pad 2.0 system, wirelessly charging electric buses, delivery vans, maybe even private EVs while they're moving or stopped at lights. Constant top-ups.
Eliminating range anxiety and downtime.
Exactly. Now, all this generated and transmitted power needs balancing. Surplus energy flows into local storage, maybe banks of ultracapacitors for quick response, SMES vaults for stability, alongside traditional batteries for longer duration needs.
The layered storage approach.
Correct. And overseeing this entire complex dance is the AI, the microgrid neural controllers, the MCCs, that distributed intelligence we talked about,
The grid's brain.
constantly monitoring, predicting loads, optimizing flow, isolating faults instantly, maybe even trading energy between districts based on real-time needs and prices. It's proactive, adaptive management.
And if disaster strikes, if the terrestrial grid fails.
That's where the solar beam gateway drones, the SBGDs, or direct beams from orbital platforms come in. Hovering high above or beaming directly, they provide that essential backup power, bypassing ground failures, keeping critical services online.
It's a truly multi-layered, interconnected intelligence system, designed for resilience from the ground up, literally.
That's the vision. But as we discussed, integrating it isn't just technical. If we connect this to the bigger picture again,
It's political, economic, cultural.
all of the above. The paper acknowledges huge challenges. Data governance, who owns and controls all this energy data? Privacy, what are the implications of monitoring energy use so closely? Equity, how do we ensure everyone benefits, not just wealthy areas?
These are massive societal questions.
Huge. It requires international cooperation on standards and infrastructure. It needs serious ethical thinking, especially about AI's role, and it demands sustained public and private investment over decades.
So it's not just flipping a switch.
Not at all. It's a generational undertaking. But the paper ends that section on a hopeful note,
Which is?
that with leadership, these challenges can be met. It circles back to that Tesla vision. A world without waste, a grid that flows like water, learns like a mind, sustains like an ecosystem. The blueprint is there, it argues. What's needed is the courage to build it.
This next part is really exciting. The paper moves from the integrated vision to specific inventions, calling them technological offspring or blueprints latent in the data, things that could be built now based on the research discussed. And it stresses, these are not science fiction.
Right, tangible applications derived from the core technologies.
First is the Modular Superconducting Urban Trunk Line, MSUT. We touched on this. Basically, prefab, plug-and-play superconducting cables for cities.
Replacing those vulnerable overhead lines with lossless buried conduits. Using those advanced YBCO films we discussed, the key is the modularity, factory-built sections, easy installation, integrated cooling and monitoring.
Making superconducting tech practical for urban deployment.
That's the goal. Faster rollout, less disruption, much higher resilience and capacity compared to digging trenches for traditional complex systems, like Lego for the future grid's backbone.
Okay, number 2. Tesla Pad 2.0 Resonant Transit Charger Grid, expanding dynamic wireless charging.
Yes, moving beyond just specific lanes to embedding resonant charging coils more widely in public transit routes, depots, maybe even at intersections.
So buses, delivery trucks charge on the go.
Or during brief stops, yes. Using efficient magnetic resonance. It includes an encrypted handshake for automatic identification and billing. The idea is seamless charging integrated into the transport network itself, reducing battery needs and enabling continuous operation for fleets.
Transforming urban logistics and public transport electrification.
Absolutely, making EVs more practical and efficient, especially for heavy-use vehicles.
Third, the self-learning power surface, SLPS.
Yeah.
This builds on the piezoelectric and thermal harvesting.
Right. It's envisioned as a composite surface material for pavements, maybe building facades, that converts vibration, heat, movement into electricity. But the smart part is key.
The AI tuning.
Exactly. Integrated AI constantly adjusts the surface's internal properties, its resistance, its energy capture profile in real time to maximize the power harvested from whatever ambient conditions exist: sun, traffic, footsteps. It optimizes itself.
So the road actively learns how to be a better power generator. Cities become batteries.
That are constantly learning and adapting to squeeze the most energy out of their environment. Ultra-distributed intelligent harvesting.
Fourth is the Solar Beam Gateway Drone, SBGD. This addresses the limits of fixed ground stations for space-based power.
Yeah, instead of needing a huge fixed rectenna on the ground, which might be obscured by weather or unusable in a disaster zone, the SBGD is a high-altitude drone, stratospheric,
Floating way up there.
way up above the weather. It catches the main power beam from an orbital satellite and then relays it down, maybe via a lower power, more focused beam, to smaller, potentially mobile ground receivers.
A mobile downlink for space power.
Exactly. Perfect for disaster relief, remote locations, military operations, anywhere you need power quickly where ground infrastructure is damaged or non-existent. It adds flexibility and resilience to the SBSP concept.
Makes space power deployable on demand.
Precisely.
And finally, number 5, the Microgrid Neural Controller, MNC, the cognitive control system.
This is the AI brain piece, but specifically designed for local microgrids. It draws on AI and IoT research. It's more than just a manager. The paper calls it a learner.
Using reinforcement learning.
Yes, to constantly adapt to local patterns, human behavior, weather forecasts, grid conditions, energy prices. It predicts loads, optimizes energy flow within the microgrid, coordinates storage, manages demand response.
Making decisions locally?
Decentralized control, yes.
Oh.
Cooperating with other MNCs and the wider grid, but acting intelligently based on its local environment. Functioning, as the paper says, like a distributed brain embedded in the electric body.
Wow. These 5 inventions really make the overall vision feel much more concrete.
They do. And what's fascinating, as the paper concludes, is that these aren't just gadgets. They represent a whole new philosophy of energy.
How so?
Adaptive, intelligent, interwoven with life. The paper says we no longer power cities, we grow them. We no longer wire homes, we connect them to the stars. It's reframing energy as an ecology.
Electricity as ecology. Each spark a signal in a vast mind. That's quite a vision.
It truly is. Moving from brute force mechanics to an intelligent living system. Hashtag tag tag outro.
So after that deep dive, traveling from aging wires to intelligent ecosystems and orbital power, what does this all mean for you listening right now?
That's a lot to take in.
It is. We've seen the vulnerabilities of today's grid, but also the incredible, almost breathtaking possibilities of this unified, intelligent, self-healing energy future.
A future built on technologies that are perhaps surprisingly closer than we think.
Exactly. The core insight for me is that this isn't just wishful thinking. It's presented as a technically grounded, scientifically supported vision, built on innovations happening right now, ready for prototyping.
The potential for a world without waste, as the paper puts it.
Yeah, where energy flows efficiently, learns intelligently, and sustains us reliably, like a true nervous system for civilization.
It really reframes our relationship with power.
Okay, let's unpack this one last time. We've seen the blueprint, we've heard the argument that the technology is largely within reach.
Which raises that really important, maybe provocative final question for you to think about.
Go on.
If the tech is feasible, if the blueprint is clear, as this white paper argues, what is actually holding us back from building this future?
Is it, like the paper suggests, mostly organizational? A lack of will to decentralize control, to collaborate?
Or are there deeper issues? Economic inertia, entrenched interests, regulatory roadblocks, maybe even just a failure of collective imagination to grasp something so transformative.
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. What needs to change? What role could you play? What part of this vision resonates most or seems most challenging? It's something worth pondering.
Yeah, definitely food for thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the future grid. We hope it sparked your curiosity.
And encourages you to keep exploring these incredible possibilities.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.